When Iran was defeated by Israel in the 12-Day War, one thing stood out. The pride of most armed forces, its air force, was nowhere to be seen. If we heard anything about the Iranian planes, it was only how they were destroyed on the ground by the Israelis. Iran made the right decision here and didn't even try to stop the Israelis in the air with its backward, completely outdated air force. However, if there is another clash in a few years, the modern Israeli or United States jets like the F-15, F-16 or F-35 will no longer be facing Iranian museum pieces like the F-4, F-5, F-14 and a few MiG-29S, but rather modern fighter jets. The Russian Su-35 Russia is starting to deliver them in exchange for Iranian drones and ammunition. At the same time, leaked documents from the Russian defense company Rostec indicate that Iran could receive up to 48. This video explains why Iran needs these jets and how the procurement happened. What are the technical capabilities of the Su-35 compared to its potential adversaries, the F-15, F-16, F-35, J-10, J-17 Rafale, and Eurofighter? And what are the geopolitical consequences? Holy cow. Now save the most at Holy with my code. It was by no means normal for the Iranian Air Force to have to hide from its opponents just to keep its pilots alive. During the 1960s and 1970s, the country was a monarchy with strong ties to the United States. Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi used Iranian oil money to build one of the most powerful and modern air forces in the world. The then Imperial Iranian Air Force, was the fifth strongest air force in the West. It was closely involved in United States military armament programs, and it was excellently trained and technically above average in modernization. Iran didn't just buy airplanes, it bought the best ones the United States exported. First the F-86 Sabre, F-84 Thunderjet, then the F-5 Tiger II and the F-4D and E-Phantom II. And as an absolute prestige object, the F-14 Tomcat including air intercept missile, 54 Phoenix long-range air-to-air missiles. Equipment, of course. Iran was the only country besides the United States to have the F-14. That highlights how important Washington considered the Shah regime as a regional pillar against the Soviet Union. There were also major investments in infrastructure, maintenance, large air force bases, spare parts depots, United States, standard training, and early integrated air defense efforts. In short, before 1979, any regional air force would have had a hard time taking on Iran. With the Islamic Revolution in 1979, this foundation collapsed overnight. The United States cut all military ties. Spare parts, ammunition, and technical support were suddenly gone. Thousands of Western-trained pilots, technicians, and officers were dismissed, jailed, or fled abroad. The new rulers distrusted the former Air Force elite, loyal to the old regime, leading to further loss of expertise. Iran kept its hardware, but it lost the ecosystem necessary to operate modern aircraft in the long term. When Saddam Hussein attacked Iran in 1980, the Air Force faced a paradox. It had modern United States jets, but hardly any spare parts and lost experienced pilots. Nevertheless, the Iranian Air Force performed surprisingly well in the war, often thanks to courage, improvisation, and remaining stocks of Western technology. But the price was enormous. The F-14s acted as flying radar systems but suffered heavy wear. The F-4S and F-5S were overused, leading to higher crash and failure rates. The aircraft were cannibalized. Some planes were taken apart to keep others flying. By 1988, the fleet was greatly reduced and technically exhausted. The war had cost Iran not only lives and economic strength, but also the core of its air superiority. Only 3 years later, in 1991 during the First Gulf War, Saddam Hussein had parts of his air force fly to Iran to keep the planes safe from Allied attacks. Just a few years earlier, Iraq and Iran had been involved in a bloody war. Apparently, the dictator in Baghdad still believed that the planes could be returned from Iran. He simply confiscated them and then put them into service, which among other things brought Mirage F-1S and Sukhoi 22s into service with the Iranian Air Force. The Iran wanted to modernize further aircraft, but none that could achieve anything against a competent opponent with modern equipment. But international sanctions have made that nearly impossible. Western jets were excluded politically, while Russia and China also hesitated for a long time. Russia didn't want to risk its ties with Israel, Egypt, and the Gulf states. China held back on strategic weapon systems, and Iran only bought small quantities of Russian MiG-29 and Sukhoi-24. No real modernization, just patchwork. When the Iranian nuclear program became known, international sanctions were added, which further restricted both Iran's income and potential sales. Without successful foreign sources for new fighter jets, Iran has tried to develop its own. Already during the Iran-Iraq War, they began using reverse engineering to start producing spare parts for their own fighter jets in order to keep them operational. The established aircraft industry then attempted to create its own designs, or at least claimed them as such. In recent years, the following types were proudly presented: the Asakash, the Sakash, the Kofsar, and the Public Relations Project, CARE 313. The reality was that these were mostly modified F-5 airframes or prototypes with limited military value. Iran can't mass-produce modern engines, active electronically scanned array radars, sensor fusion, or advanced avionics. The stealth aircraft KHER 313 was not even that. It was a mock-up that wasn't even capable of flight. Iran can now produce drones and large quantities of missiles and cruise missiles, but it still cannot make fully functional fighter jets, especially not any of the 4th or 5th generation. Because a strong air force was lacking, Iran relied on other instruments. It has proxies like Hezbollah, Houthis, Shia militias, plus ballistic missiles and drones. This strategy has made Iran dangerous in the region, but it has not enabled it for air defense. The Israeli war against Iran, as well as the United States strike in 2025, have made that clear. The S-300s were disabled, Fe-14s destroyed on the ground, and no Iranian interceptors appeared in the air. Iran was militarily dismantled in front of the whole world because it lacked a modern air force. Many people resolve to improve self-care each January. I know that feeling, but in December, when it's cold, stressful, and there's less sunlight, sticking to routines makes the most sense to me. That's why I keep my morning routine simple: a glass of water and 1 scoop of AG1. AG1 has become a regular part of my routine because it makes me feel like I'm starting my day with a solid foundation. I often work long hours, travel frequently, and don't always eat well on the go. AG1 helps me avoid any gaps by providing vitamins, minerals, plant nutrients, probiotic cultures, and fiber. I won't say it's the only reason, but since using AG1 I feel more stable, especially with energy and digestion. It was important to me that AG1 meets the scientific standards I expect. The formula is backed by 15 years of research and is continually refined. I find the clinical studies particularly interesting. Randomized, placebo-controlled, double or even triple blind. That's by no means a given in this industry. For example, these studies show that some nutrients in AG1 are quickly bioavailable and that the microbiome, or good gut bacteria, can measurably improve. Of course, I can't say for sure how much of that I personally feel, but the data is convincing enough for me to include it in my routine. AG1 is also independently tested by the Cologne List and Informed Choice, and every batch is tested in external laboratories for safety and quality, including banned substances, heavy metals, and microbial parameters, in case you want to test AG1. Limited time introductory discount at www.drinkage1.com. Geschichte. The first month costs €69 instead of €87. The welcome kit with shaker, can, and spoon is included for free. The subscription is flexible, can be paused or cancelled at any time, and thanks to the 30-day money-back guarantee, it's completely risk-free. If you don't want to wait until January, visit www.drinkage1.com. Geschichte. Including prohibited substances. Nobelpräsent Stereo. Not to endanger Israel, Egypt, or the Gulf. China has exported some systems, but has consistently held back when it comes to high-quality fighter jets. As a result, Iran only got MiG-29S and Sukhoi-24s, which did not enable significant modernization. Only the Russian attack on Ukraine fundamentally changed the situation. Russia has come under significant military and industrial pressure and has had to replace systems that were lost due to Western sanctions. Meanwhile, Iran's drone industry gave Moscow exactly what it needed: cost-effective, mass-producible unmanned systems. This has created a new mutual dependency. Tehran has realized that a historic opportunity has arisen to gain access to modern military technology for the first time in decades. Moscow, in turn, has treated Iran as a key security factor for the first time and was willing to supply weapon systems that were previously off-limits. Industrial leaks, including documents from Rostec and Kret, have shown that Iran has ordered 48, with deliveries scheduled to take place between 2026 and 2028. Previously, there were reports of alleged landings of Su-35s in Tehran. However, it was still unclear if these were actually intended for the Iranian Air Force. However, the reported order was consistent with statements made by Iranian officials who spoke of a comprehensive fleet overhaul. With this order, Iran has laid the foundation to build a viable squadron structure in the medium term. What is crucial here is that not only the number of aircraft matters, but also the ability to keep them operational in the long term. A challenge Iran has only partly overcome so far. The entire deal was based on a mutual exchange of capabilities. Russia has received Iranian drones, ammunition, and technical support, which have been used directly in the war in Ukraine. In return, Iran has received systems that have at least partially compensated for its conventional weaknesses, including the Su-35 and modernized air defense components. This partnership has quickly evolved from a simple exchange deal to a strategic alliance, which has brought both sides closer together in terms of security policy than ever before. Particularly significant is the planned establishment of a local final assembly line, which has been reported. Russian documents have indicated that components are to be assembled and maintained in Iran in the future. This measure has given Tehran hope of expanding technical skills in the long term, but at the same time has created a new structural dependency. Key technologies, engines, broader avionics, and software remain fully under Russian control. Iran has gained operational capacity, but lacks technological independence. Assembling on site provides as little real ability to build their own aircraft as buying a flat-pack wardrobe kit. It means about as much ability to manufacture furniture as assembling Swedish flat-pack furniture does. However, later maintenance is easier if you have personnel who previously assembled the aircraft and have the necessary tools for it. The delivery of the Su-35 has triggered noticeable regional and global reactions. Israel has assessed the modernization of the Iranian Air Force as a strategic challenge. The United States has classified the deal as another building block in the security policy rapprochement between Moscow and Tehran. Russia has Spain. Tehran has consciously accepted the associated risks because access to modern fighter jets has been considered indispensable for security policy. The Su-35 was designed as a heavy air superiority fighter that combines range, kinetic performance, and high weapons load with limited elements of modern avionics. Its structure comes from the Sukhoi 27 family, but it has been aerodynamically optimized. The two AL-41F1S engines have provided an exceptional thrust-to-weight ratio, which, together with thrust vector control, is one of the main strengths of the Sukhoi 35. Features of the Sukhoi 35 include the AL-41F1S engines with controllable thrust vector and the Irbis-E radar. A powerful passive electronically scanned array system with high peak power can track 30 targets and engage 8 air targets simultaneously. Russian sources say it can detect 3 square meter targets up to 400 kilometers away when its radar is focused. The Sukhoi 35 also uses other infrared search and track sensors for passive heat source detection. This lets it detect targets without active radar, but only at much shorter ranges. It also enables tracking of stealth aircraft invisible to radar using their heat signatures. Additionally, the Sukhoi 35 has L-band antennas in the wing roots for short-range stealth detection. The high weapons load is also one of the characteristics of the Sukhoi 35. It can carry up to 8 tons of weapons. In addition, it can use modernized guided missiles of the R-77-1 type and the R-37. The Sukhoi 35 has its strengths in range, power, and maneuverability. However, it falls short of Western 4.5 generation jets in sensor fusion, data networks, and electronic warfare. And fifth generation jets? It has fallen behind in terms of generation jets. It's also not certain whether Iran will get the best possible version or just a stripped-down export version with reduced capabilities. Both the F-16 and the F-15 have received modern, active, electronically scanned array radar systems with their latest upgrades. Therefore, they clearly surpass the Su-35 in avionics, electronic warfare, and long-range combat. The Su-35 would be dangerous to them under equal conditions, especially in close-range dogfights. However, this is extremely unlikely, especially when Western airborne warning and control system reconnaissance and battle management aircraft are deployed at the same time. It's a similar situation against Rafale and Eurofighter, which are also deployed in the Gulf. In networked combat, Western fighter jets have significant structural advantages, while the Su-35 has better weapon deployment capabilities in isolated close combat. However, this is very unlikely in combat against networked aircraft led by AVEX. The Su-35 has provided Iran with the most advanced fighter jet platform the country has received since 1979. Its strengths clearly lie in range, close-range air superiority, kinetic performance, and the ability to deploy heavy air-to-air missiles like the R-37M. At the same time, it has fallen behind modern Western and Chinese systems in the digital battle space. In the regional context, compared to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Israel, it represents a clear leap in capability. However, it doesn't match the F-35 new F-15 variants, or Rafale, which are clearly superior. Only Pakistani joint fighter 17S can be reliably impressed by the Sukhoi 35. The military strike against Iran in 2025 has clearly shifted the security power structure of the Middle East in favor of Israel and its partners. The near-total elimination of Iranian air defense systems, the destruction of grounded aircraft on the bases, and the absence of a serious, successful Iranian counterattack have made things clear to Tehran that it has clearly lagged behind its rivals on the conventional level. This strategic experience has increased the political pressure to finally catch up on the modernization that has been postponed for decades. In this context, the Sukhoi 35 delivery has meant more for Iran than simply acquiring a weapons system. It can therefore be understood as a symbolic turning point where the Iranian leadership appears capable of taking action again, both domestically and internationally. In general, this could be the beginning of a comprehensive modernization program, especially since 48 aircraft are not enough against any of its potential adversaries. However, whether Iran is even remotely capable of financing the required numbers is another question, which probably has to be answered with no. Russia has put itself in a position through the war against Ukraine where it urgently needed Iranian weapons, especially drones. Iran, in turn, has used this dependency to gain access to armaments that Moscow had previously deliberately withheld. The Sukhoi 35, as well as modernized S-300 or S-400 systems, have created a strategic interconnection that is likely to bind both states more closely together in the coming years. However, this cooperation has not developed into an equal partnership. Russia has kept the key technologies, while Iran has primarily gained operational capabilities. Politically, this means that Tehran has effectively limited its ability to act independently from Moscow, because spare parts, software upgrades, and training must be continuously sourced from Russia. This dependency has formed a security policy bond that Tehran would struggle to break during a conflict. At the same time, the 12-day war also proved that while there may be a partnership with Moscow, there is not actually an alliance. Iran shouldn't expect future Russian military aid. China has supported the strategic opening between Moscow and Tehran without itself engaging in offensive supply programs. Beijing has bought Iranian oil, promoted infrastructure projects, and thus enabled the Iranian regime to maintain a minimum level of economic stability. At the same time, China has been careful not to provoke any Western reactions by not supplying high technology such as the J-10C or J-20 to Iran. This has positioned China as a secondary supporter, which has not contributed direct military capabilities, but has created the economic conditions that allow Iran to modernize its military in the first place. Working with Russia has created an informal triangle that indirectly opposes Western interests in Ukraine, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific. The acquisition of one or two squadrons of Sukhoi 35S has not turned the military balance in the Gulf upside down, but it has noticeably expanded Iran's room for maneuver. With the range of the R-37M missiles and the powerful engines, Iran is receiving, for the first time in decades, a fighter jet capable of actively threatening regional targets beyond its own borders. For the Persian Gulf airspace, this means United States and Israeli airborne warning and control system and tankers must now keep greater safety distances. Coalition aircraft have to coordinate airspace surveillance flights more closely in order to detect Iranian advances in time. Iranian command now has more ways to temporarily restrict or extend airspace control. However, the Sukhoi 35 has not established any chance for Iranian air superiority against its Western counterparts. Weaknesses in avionics, data link, electronic warfare defense, and pilot training greatly restrict tactical options. The effect only occurs where opponents have to operate under time or space pressure, or where Iranian forces can exploit asymmetric advantages. In a direct exchange of blows, the Sukhoi 35S remain dangerous, but inferior. Iran will also have too few aircraft until a larger follow-up order is made. Despite the Sukhoi 35 order, Iran still retains key military weaknesses. The Air Force lacks enough modern aircraft to fully secure the airspace. The air defense has been thinned out by the 12-day war and requires a comprehensive reorganization. The logistics and training system does not meet the standards required by modern combat aircraft units. The dependence on Russian technology has limited strategic flexibility. In a conflict with Israel or the United States, Iran would still have to rely on asymmetric means. Because modern Western fighter jets, operating in networked formations and combined with precision weapons and airborne warning and control system, supported beyond visual range profiles, significantly outperform the Sukhoi 35 in many scenarios. The government in Tehran has staged the Sukhoi 35 as a symbol of returning to cutting-edge technology. After the heavy military and political defeats of recent decades, the leadership has used the jets as a symbol of renewal. To strengthen loyalty within the Revolutionary Guards, the Air Force, and the political elite. For propaganda purposes, the Sukhoi 35S have served a dual function. They have enabled domestic stabilization because the modernization could be sold as a victory over sanctions, and they have enabled foreign policy deterrence, because the message was sent that Iran could return to conventional strength. The leadership now knows fighter jets alone can't guarantee a strategic turnaround. The Sukhoi 35 is a matter of prestige, but only a part of a more complex military and political repertoire. The Sukhoi 35 boosts Iran's air power but doesn't alter the balance. For the first time in decades, they have enabled true modernization, but won't change the strategic balance of power. Israel's F-35, Saudi Arabia's F-15S, a Gulf Bloc 70 F-16s, and Western electronic warfare systems are still clearly superior. At the same time, the procurement of the Sukhoi 35 has shown that Iran, after the devastating experiences of the 12th century, is beginning to seriously close the gaps in its armed forces again. The country has learned that asymmetric capabilities alone, drones, missiles, militias, cannot compensate for conventional weaknesses. The modernization of the Air Force is a necessary step, but only the first one for the future. Does that mean Iran will also take the next steps? So, by professionalizing training, improving maintenance, networking systems, and maybe even ordering additional aircraft types, the military balance could slowly begin to shift. Not dramatically, but noticeably. The region remains in flux, and the Sukhoi 35S are a visible sign of this development. For you as viewers, one thing is clear. Behind the delivery of a single weapon system, there is much more than meets the eye. Whoever understands why Iran has not received modern jets for decades, what political ties Russia and China have established in Tehran, and why the Sukhoi 35 is a warning signal for the Gulf states and Israel, can better assess future Middle East developments. New arms deals, regional escalation, or strategic changes. If this video helped you see the big picture, not just the headlines, then stay tuned. On this channel, we explain security policy developments in depth, helping you understand what's really behind the news. I would also like to thank the supporters, especially Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Kemp and Lieutenants Jans van Eck and Uwe de Vren, nickname 2.bib Carsten Schulz, Gulasch Nasher 4000 Tequila 42, Badass Lawyer Vision, SoundLab, PKIF, Wonwoo Mahamori, Robert Veal, 1528 Bertenment, Janice Gu, Anti-X, Sasha Muller, Cunningham, and Eustress. Thank you. This wouldn't be possible without them.